observation versus experiment. Now, observation is a collective figure about a variable and is one of many studies that can be used to collect data. An observational study has no interference by the conductors of the experiment and is watching an event, collecting data, or measuring something. What is an experiment? An experiment is a scientific procedure undertaken to make a discovery, test a hypothesis, or demonstrate a known fact. During the experiment, there are set groups with conditions that are changed, usually through multiple trials, in order to change the results. The results of the altered groups are compared to the control group, where nothing is changed so that inferences can be made.
Alright, so how are they different? The difference between an observation and an experiment is that an observational study, we measure or survey members of a sample without trying to affect them at all. But in a controlled experiment, we assign people or things to groups and apply some kind of treatment to one of the groups while the other group does not receive the treatment. In observations, we only observe, and in experiments, we both observe and control. So, how would we use these things? We use an observational study whenever we want to collect data but make no change or effect to anything in the study. An observational study could be used to collect data such as heights, hair color, eye color, and other things that could just be watched or asked and not be swayed or affected. In the other case, we use an experiment whenever you're trying to collect data, except this time we make changes in order to make different outcomes from those changes that you make. An experimental study can be used to collect data on how X will affect Y. For example, how the amount of time someone spends on their phone affects the amount of time that has to sleep that person to get that message.
What does a successful observation look like? A simple survey could be an example of an observational study. Say you were to survey a random sample of teenagers and ask them how many hours they spend playing video games per day compared to how many hours of sleep they get. The data from the survey shows that the more teens play video games, the less sleep they get. No change was made in the study, only a survey was administered and conclusions were drawn from that. This is an example of an observational study. Say we were to take two different random samples of teens, except they were divided into two groups. One group would have a set amount of time to play video games where they were allowed to play before they would sleep, while the other group would have no time limit. They were allowed to play as long as they wanted. The amount of hours of sleep both got were compared. There's action taken besides just plain observing in this example, and because that is the case, this is an experimental study, not an observation. If there is any change to the study besides just watching to see what happens, then that study is not an observational study, it's an experiment. So any changes at all in the study are an experiment, but no change at all is just an observation.